The sun had long since dipped below the jagged mountain peaks, leaving the valley shrouded in an eerie, impenetrable darkness. Jack Granger shivered, pulling his jacket tighter as he trudged through the dense undergrowth, his flashlight beam cutting weak and wavering paths through the gloom. He kept his eyes peeled, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement, his heart pounding in his ears. Where was it? He'd seen it with his own eyes just hours ago, that massive, hulking figure vanishing between the trees. Jack had spent years searching for proof of its existence, devoting his life to studying the creature. And now, when he was so close to finally capturing it, everything had fallen apart. How could he have been so stupid? Blinded by the promise of money, he'd betrayed his partner, sold out their research to the highest bidder. But the creature, the legendary Sasquatch, was no mere animal. It was intelligent, cunning. And now, it was hunting him, determined to make him pay for his treachery. Jack's breath caught in his throat as a twig snapped nearby, and he froze, his senses on high alert. The forest was eerily silent, save for the faint rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. Swallowing hard, he slowly swept the flashlight beam from side to side, searching for any sign of the beast. Suddenly, a massive shadow loomed out of the darkness, and Jack let out a strangled cry, stumbling backward in terror. But the creature didn't attack. It simply stood there, its glowing eyes fixed on him, as if sizing him up. Jack's mind raced, his thoughts a jumbled mass of fear and desperation. He had to get away, had to find a way to escape this nightmare. Turning, he fled deeper into the forest, his footsteps pounding against the soft earth as he ran. Branches whipped at his face, thorns tearing at his skin, but he didn't slow down, driven by a primal instinct for survival. He had to put as much distance between himself and the Sasquatch as possible. After what felt like an eternity, Jack finally reached a small clearing, his lungs burning, his legs aching. Collapsing to the ground, he gasped for air, his mind racing as he tried to figure out what to do next. He couldn't stay out here in the open. The creature would find him sooner or later. He had to get to safety, had to find a way to get back to civilization. But as he scanned the clearing, his heart sank. There, in the center, was a massive footprint-shaped indentation in the soft soil, easily the size of a grown man's hand. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he realized the truth. The Sasquatch had been waiting for him, had led him here, to this isolated spot, where it could exact its revenge. Panic welled up inside him, and he scrambled to his feet, his eyes darting frantically around the clearing. He had to get out of here, had to find a way to escape the creature's wrath.
But which way should he go? The forest seemed to close in around him, the shadows looming ever closer, and he felt a chill run down his spine. Suddenly, a low, rumbling growl echoed through the trees, and Jack froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Slowly he turned, his flashlight beam illuminating a massive, hulking figure emerging from the darkness. The Sasquatch was here, its eyes burning with a primal fury, its powerful muscles rippling beneath its shaggy coat. Jack knew he was trapped, knew that there was no way he could outrun the creature. His only hope was to try and reason with it, to somehow appeal to its intelligence and persuade it to spare his life. Swallowing hard, he raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, his voice trembling as he spoke. "Listen, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was desperate. I needed the money, and I made a terrible mistake. But I'm begging you, please, don't hurt me. I'll do anything you want. Just don't kill me." The Sasquatch seemed to consider his words, its gaze unwavering. Then, slowly, it began to move forward, its massive feet crashing through the underbrush. Jack felt a surge of terror, his mind racing as he tried to come up with a plan, any way to escape the creature's wrath. But as the Sasquatch drew closer, Jack realized that it wasn't attacking, it was simply approaching him, its movements deliberate and measured. Holding his breath, he watched as the creature reached out a massive clawed hand, and to his shock, it gently touched his face, as if examining him. Jack stared up at the Sasquatch, his eyes wide with disbelief. What was it doing? Was it showing him mercy? He hardly dared to hope, but as the creature's gaze softened, he felt a glimmer of relief. Maybe, just maybe, he could reason with it, could convince it to spare his life. Swallowing hard, he spoke again, his voice trembling. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I've done. I never meant to betray you. I was so desperate.
Please, I'll do anything to make it up to you. Just don't kill me." The Sasquatch seemed to consider his words, its eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Then, slowly, it turned and began to walk away, disappearing back into the shadows. Jack watched, his heart pounding, scarcely daring to believe that he had been spared. But as the creature vanished, he felt a wave of relief wash over him, and he sank to his knees, his legs shaking. He had survived, against all odds. But as he sat there, catching his breath, he knew that his ordeal was far from over. The Sasquatch had spared his life, but it would be watching him, waiting for him to make another mistake, and Jack knew that if he ever crossed paths with the creature again, he might not be so lucky. With a heavy sigh, he pushed himself to his feet, his mind racing as he tried to figure out his next move.
He had to get out of the forest, had to find a way to get back to civilization and get as far away from this place as possible. Turning, he began to make his way through the trees, his steps quickening as he felt the weight of the Sasquatch's watchful gaze on his back. As he walked, Jack couldn't help but wonder what would become of him now. He had betrayed the trust of the very creature he had dedicated his life to studying, and now he was paying the price. But even as he felt a deep sense of regret and shame, he couldn't help but be in awe of the Sasquatch, its power and intelligence beyond anything he had ever imagined. He knew that he would never be able to forget this encounter, that the memory of the creature's glowing eyes and its gentle touch would haunt him for the rest of his days. And as he emerged from the forest, stepping out into the moonlit night, he couldn't help but feel a sense of both relief and trepidation. Relieved to have escaped with his life, but terrified of what the future might hold. Only time would tell if the Sasquatch would truly let him go, or if it would one day come back to claim the retribution it so rightly deserved. Jack shuddered at the thought, his steps quickening as he made his way towards the safety of civilization. But deep down, he knew that he would never truly be free, not as long as the Sasquatch still roamed the wilderness, watching, waiting, and ready to strike. The forest around him seemed to close in, the shadows looming ever closer as Jack Granger stumbled through the undergrowth. His heart pounded in his chest, terror coursing through his veins as he fled from the imposing figure of the Sasquatch that had spared his life. Jack had to get as far away from that creature as possible. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, watching him, waiting for the moment to strike. The memory of its glowing eyes and gentle touch sent a shiver down his spine. He had to find safety, had to reach civilization before the Sasquatch caught up to him. As he finally emerged from the forest, Jack breathed a sigh of relief. The open road stretched out before him, a beacon of hope in the darkness. He quickly made his way to his car, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the keys. He had to get out of here, had to put as much distance between himself and the Sasquatch as possible. Peeling out onto the road, Jack drove like a madman, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror, searching for any sign of the creature. But the forest behind him remained silent, and as he put more and more miles between himself and the encounter, he felt himself start to relax, if only slightly. Eventually, Jack reached the small town he had been staying in, and he quickly pulled into the motel parking lot. Stumbling out of the car, he hurried to his room, locking the door behind him and drawing the curtains.
He collapsed onto the bed, his body trembling with the adrenaline that had been coursing through him. As the minutes ticked by, Jack's heart rate slowly began to return to normal. He tried to make sense of what had happened, to understand why the Sasquatch had spared his life. Had it truly shown him mercy? Or was there some other, more sinister motive behind its actions? Jack shook his head, trying to push those thoughts aside. He needed to focus on getting out of this town, on putting as much distance between himself and the creature as possible. He couldn't risk staying here, not when the Sasquatch might be tracking his every move. Suddenly, a knock at the door startled him, and he froze, his heart pounding once again. Slowly, he approached the door, peering out through the peephole. To his relief, it was just the motel manager, a kindly old man with a concerned expression on his face. "Mr. Granger, are you all right?" the man asked, his brow furrowed. "I saw you come in looking rather shaken. Is everything okay?" Jack hesitated, not sure how to respond. Should he tell the truth, or would that just put the old man in danger? I'm fine," he finally said, his voice wavering. "Just a long day, that's all. I'm sorry if I worried you." The manager didn't seem convinced, but he nodded slowly. "Well, if you need anything, you just let me know. I'll be here if you need me." Jack waited until the man had walked away before letting out a deep breath. He knew he couldn't stay here, not with the Sasquatch out there, possibly still hunting him. He had to get out of this town, had to find a way to disappear. Gathering his belongings, Jack hurried out to his car, his mind racing.
Where could he go? He couldn't go back to his old life, not after what he had done. The Sasquatch would be watching, waiting for him to slip up. As he pulled out of the motel parking lot, Jack's eyes were drawn to a flyer tacked to a nearby bulletin board. It was an advertisement for a remote cabin rental, deep in the heart of the wilderness. The perfect place to hide, he thought, his heart pounding. Without a second thought, Jack turned his car in the direction of the cabin, his foot pressing down on the accelerator. He had to get there before the Sasquatch caught up to him. He couldn't let that creature find him. Not again. As he drove, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the road. Jack kept his eyes glued to the rearview mirror, constantly scanning for any sign of the Sasquatch, but the road remained empty, and he felt a sense of relief wash over him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack arrived at the cabin. It was a cozy, rustic structure, nestled deep in the heart of the forest. He quickly grabbed his belongings and hurried inside, locking the door behind him. Jack let out a shaky breath, his heart still pounding. He was safe, for now, but he knew that the Sasquatch was still out there, waiting, watching.
He couldn't let his guard down, not for a second. As he settled into the cabin, Jack's mind drifted to the events of the past few hours. He still couldn't believe that the Sasquatch had spared his life, that it had shown him such unexpected mercy. What did it all mean? Was the creature really as intelligent and cunning as he had always believed? Jack shook his head, trying to push those thoughts aside. He needed to focus on the here and now, on keeping himself safe. He couldn't afford to get distracted, not with the Sasquatch still out there. Suddenly, a loud noise outside caught his attention, and Jack froze, his heart racing. Slowly, he approached the window, peering out into the darkness. At first, he saw nothing, but then, in the distance, he caught a glimpse of a massive, hulking figure moving through the trees. Jack's breath caught in his throat, and he stumbled backward, his eyes wide with terror. The Sasquatch had found him, just as he had feared. He had to get out of here, had to find a way to escape before the creature caught up to him. Frantically, Jack began to search the cabin, looking for anything he could use as a weapon. He had to defend himself, had to fight off the Sasquatch if it came for him. But as he rummaged through the drawers and cabinets, his heart sank. There was nothing, no weapons, no tools, nothing that could help him. He was trapped, at the mercy of the Sasquatch. Panic welled up inside him, and he began to pace the cabin, his mind racing. What was he going to do? He couldn't just sit here and wait for the creature to come for him. He had to find a way out, had to get as far away from this place as possible. Suddenly, his eyes landed on the front door, and a plan began to form in his mind. He could try to make a break for it, to run for his life. It was a long shot, but it was his only chance. Taking a deep breath, Jack steeled himself, his hand trembling as he reached for the doorknob. He had to do this, had to try and escape before the Sasquatch found him. Slowly, he opened the door, his eyes darting around the forest outside. It was silent, the darkness pressing in around him. Swallowing hard, he stepped out into the night, his heart pounding in his chest. But as he turned to make a run for it, he froze, his blood running cold. There, standing just a few yards away, was the Sasquatch, its glowing eyes fixed on him, its massive frame blocking the only escape route. Jack felt a surge of panic, his mind racing as he realized that he had been trapped, that the creature had been waiting for him all along. He had been so foolish, so naive, to think that he could ever escape the Sasquatch's grasp. As the creature began to move towards him, Jack knew that there was no way out. He was helpless, at the mercy of the Sasquatch, and he could do nothing but wait for his fate to be sealed.
Suddenly, a glint of metal caught his eye, and he glanced down to see a pistol lying in the grass, just a few feet away. Without a second thought, he lunged for it, his fingers closing around the cold, familiar grip. Whirling around, he raised the gun, his finger poised on the trigger. The Sasquatch froze, its eyes narrowing, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. But just as Jack was about to pull the trigger, a sudden movement in the darkness caught his eye, and he turned, his heart pounding. What he saw next made his blood run cold, and he felt a wave of shock and disbelief wash over him. For there, emerging from the shadows, was a figure he had never expected to see again, his long-lost partner, the very person he had betrayed. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he stared in disbelief at the figure emerging from the shadows. It couldn't be. His long-lost partner, the one he had betrayed, was standing right in front of him. "Tom," Jack breathed, his voice barely above a whisper.
But how? I thought you were dead. Tom stepped forward, his face etched with a mixture of anger and sorrow. You left me for dead, Jack. You sold out our research and left me to be killed by that thing. Jack felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had betrayed his partner, his friend, all for the promise of money and fame. And now here he was, facing the consequences of his actions. I'm sorry, Tom, Jack said, his voice shaking. I didn't know what I was doing. I was so blinded by greed. Save it, Tom snapped, cutting him off. I don't want your apologies. All I want is for you to pay for what you've done. Jack's grip tightened on the gun, his heart racing. So what? You're gonna kill me? Tom let out a hollow laugh. Kill you? No, that would be too easy. I want you to suffer, Jack. I want you to feel the same fear and desperation that I felt when you left me to die. Suddenly, a low, rumbling growl echoed through the trees, and Jack's blood ran cold. The Sasquatch was still there, watching, waiting. And it seems you've already made a new friend, Tom said, his lips curling into a twisted smile. How convenient. Jack's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. His partner, the one he had betrayed, was now teaming up with the Sasquatch to get his revenge. It was a nightmare, a twisted, unthinkable scenario. Tom, please, Jack pleaded. I know what I did was wrong, but there's no need for this. We can work it out. We can work it out, Tom interrupted, his voice dripping with contempt. You really think it's that simple? You destroyed everything we built, Jack, and now you're gonna pay the price. The Sasquatch took a step forward, its massive frame looming over them. Jack's grip on the gun tightened, but he knew it was no use. He was trapped, outnumbered, and at the mercy of his former partner and the creature he had spent years trying to capture. What do you want from me? Jack asked, his voice barely audible. Tom's eyes narrowed, and he let out a cold, humorless laugh. What do I want? I want you to suffer, Jack. I want you to feel the same pain and anguish that I've felt day in and day out since you betrayed me. He paused, his gaze flicking to the Sasquatch. And I think our friend here has just the thing in mind. Jack's heart sank as he realized the full extent of their plan. They were going to torture him, to break him down both physically and mentally until he was nothing more than a shell of his former self. Please, Tom, he begged, don't do this. I'll do anything, I swear. Just don't let that thing hurt me. Tom's expression hardened, and he shook his head. It's too late for that, Jack. You made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. Suddenly, the Sasquatch let out a deafening roar, and Jack felt a surge of pure terror course through him. He raised the gun, his finger hovering over the trigger, but he knew it was no use. He was outnumbered, outmatched, and completely at the mercy of his captors. As the Sasquatch charged towards him, Jack squeezed his eyes shut, bracing himself for the impact. But the blow never came. Instead, he felt a massive hand wrap around his throat, lifting him off the ground with ease. Jack struggled to breathe, his lungs burning as the Sasquatch's grip tightened. He could feel his consciousness slipping away, the world around him fading into darkness. Just as he was about to lose consciousness, the pressure on his throat suddenly released, and he fell to the ground, gasping for air. Lifting his head, he saw the Sasquatch standing over him, its glowing eyes fixed on Tom. "What are you doing?" Tom demanded, his voice laced with confusion and anger. "I told you to kill him." The Sasquatch let out a low, rumbling growl, and to Jack's surprise, it stepped between him and Tom, shielding him from his former partner. "I don't understand," Tom said, his brow furrowed. "What's going on?" Jack watched in stunned silence as the Sasquatch turned to face him, its massive hand reaching down to gently touch his face. The creature's eyes seemed to hold a strange, almost human-like compassion, and Jack felt a wave of confusion and disbelief wash over him. "Why?" he breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. The Sasquatch let out a low, rumbling growl, and for a moment, Jack could swear he saw a glimmer of understanding in the creature's eyes. It was as if the Sasquatch was trying to communicate something to him, something beyond the bounds of simple human language.
Suddenly, Tom let out a frustrated growl and lunged forward, his hands reaching for Jack's throat. But before he could reach him, the Sasquatch swung its massive arm, knocking Tom back with a force that sent him tumbling to the ground. Tom lay there, stunned, his eyes wide with disbelief.
"What the hell are you doing?" he shouted, his voice trembling with anger. The Sasquatch let out another rumbling growl, its gaze fixed on Tom. Jack watched, his heart pounding, as the two adversaries stared each other down, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Slowly, Tom pushed himself to his feet, his eyes narrowing. "So, that's how it's gonna be, huh?" he said, his voice dripping with venom. "Fine. If you want to protect him, then you'll both die together." Before Jack could react, Tom raised his hand, and a sudden, blinding flash of light filled the clearing. Jack felt a searing pain in his shoulder, and he cried out in agony, clutching the wound. As the light faded, Jack realized that Tom had somehow managed to produce a weapon, a strange, futuristic-looking device that had struck him with a powerful blast of energy. The Sasquatch let out a deafening roar, and Jack watched in horror as the creature charged towards Tom, its massive frame moving with a speed and agility that belied its size. But Tom was ready, and as the Sasquatch closed in, he raised the device again, unleashing another blinding blast of energy. This time the Sasquatch howled in pain, its massive body convulsing as the energy coursed through it. Jack watched, his heart pounding, as the two adversaries engaged in a brutal, relentless battle. Tom was fast, his reflexes honed by years of training, and he seemed to anticipate the Sasquatch's every move, striking with devastating precision. But the Sasquatch was no mere animal, and it fought with a ferocity and intelligence that Jack had never seen before. It dodged and weaved, its massive frame moving with a grace that defied its size, and it landed blow after blow on Tom, its powerful fists and claws ripping and tearing at its flesh. Jack, still reeling from the pain in his shoulder, could only watch in horror as the battle raged on. He wanted to help, to do something, anything to turn the tide of the fight. But he was powerless, his body racked with pain and his mind clouded with confusion. As the two combatants continued to clash, Jack realized that he was caught in the middle of a conflict that went far beyond his own personal betrayal. There was something much bigger at play here, something that he had only begun to understand. And as he watched the Sasquatch and Tom fight, each one determined to destroy the other, Jack couldn't help but wonder what it all meant. What was the true nature of the creature, and why had it chosen to protect him? And what did Tom know that he didn't? The battle raged on, and Jack felt a sense of dread settle in the pit of his stomach. He knew that no matter the outcome, his life would never be the same. He was caught in the midst of a struggle that was far beyond his understanding, and he had no idea how it would all end. As the night wore on, Jack's consciousness began to fade, the pain in his shoulder growing increasingly unbearable. He felt himself slipping away, the sounds of the battle fading into the distance. But just before he lost consciousness, he caught a glimpse of something that made his heart skip a beat. There, in the distance, he saw a figure emerge from the trees, a figure that he had never expected to see again. It was his old mentor, the one who had first introduced him to the world of Sasquatch research. And as their eyes met, Jack felt a surge of hope and desperation rise up within him. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this nightmare after all. Jack's head throbbed as he regained consciousness, the faint sound of voices echoing around him. Slowly he opened his eyes, squinting against the bright light. "He's awake," a familiar voice said. Jack recognized it immediately, his old mentor, Dr. Abigail Sinclair. "Abigail," he croaked, his throat dry and raspy. What happened?" Abigail leaned over him, her brow creased with worry. "Easy there, Jack. You've been through a lot." Jack tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in his shoulder made him wince. "The Sasquatch and Tom, where are they?" Abigail placed a gentle hand on his arm, holding him down. "The Sasquatch is safe, for now. But Tom, I'm afraid he got away."
Jack's heart sank. I have to go after him. He's... No, Jack, Abigail interrupted. You are in no condition to go anywhere. You need to rest and heal. Jack wanted to argue, but the look in Abigail's eyes told him it was futile. What happened? He asked instead. Abigail sighed heavily. I was doing some research in the area when I heard the commotion. By the time I got there, you were already injured, and the Sasquatch was protecting you from Tom. She paused, her gaze darkening. Tom had some kind of advanced weaponry. I've never seen anything like it. He was trying to kill both you and the Sasquatch. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. But why? Why would he do that? Abigail shook her head. I'm not entirely sure, but I have a suspicion. There's something bigger going on here, Jack. Something that goes far beyond your personal conflict with Tom. Jack searched her face, his mind racing. What do you mean? Abigail's expression grew serious. I think there are powerful forces at work, forces that are trying to control or exploit the Sasquatch, and Tom, it seems, is working for them. Jack's eyes widened. You mean there's some kind of conspiracy? Abigail nodded grimly. I'm afraid so, and you, my friend, are right in the middle of it. Jack felt a wave of dread wash over him. But how? How did I get caught up in all this? Abigail placed a comforting hand on his arm. It's a long story, Jack, and I'm not sure I have all the answers. But what I do know is that the Sasquatch trusts you, and that's important. She paused, her gaze shifted to the doorway. Speaking of which, he's been waiting for you to wake up. Jack followed her gaze and felt his breath catch in his throat.
There, standing just outside the door, was the massive, hulking figure of the Sasquatch. The creature's eyes were fixed on him, and Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and something else, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. How? Jack began, his voice barely above a whisper. Abigail smiled softly. The Sasquatch brought you here, to my cabin. He's been watching over you, making sure you are safe. Jack stared at the Sasquatch, his mind reeling. But why? Why would it do that? Abigail's expression grew serious. That's what we need to find out, Jack. There's more to this creature than we ever imagined. And I believe it holds the key to unraveling this entire conspiracy. Jack felt a surge of determination. Then what are we waiting for? We need to figure out what's going on, and we need to stop Tom and whoever else is behind this. Abigail shook her head. Not yet, Jack. You're still injured, and you need to rest. The Sasquatch and I will handle things for now. Jack opened his mouth to protest, but Abigail cut him off. No arguments. You've been through enough. Let us take care of this for a while, and when you're feeling better, we'll fill you in on everything. Jack sighed, realizing he wasn't going to win this battle. All right, but promise me you'll be careful, Abigail. Tom is dangerous, and he's not afraid to use that weapon of his. Abigail nodded. You'll be careful, I promise, and I'll make sure the Sasquatch is watching over you. She glanced over her shoulder, and Jack followed her gaze to see the massive creature still standing there, its eyes fixed on him. There was something in the Sasquatch's expression, something almost protective. Jack felt a surge of gratitude and wonder. Thank you, he said softly, his words directed at the Sasquatch. The creature let out a low, rumbling sound, and Jack swore he saw a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. Abigail placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. Rest now, my friend. We'll take it from here. Jack nodded reluctantly, his mind still racing with questions. As Abigail left the room, he found himself once again alone with the Sasquatch. The creature moved closer, its massive frame casting a looming shadow over Jack. He held his breath, unsure of what to expect. Suddenly, the Sasquatch reached out a hand, gently touching Jack's injured shoulder. Jack flinched, but the creature's touch was surprisingly gentle, almost soothing. As the Sasquatch's hand hovered over the wound, Jack watched in amazement as a faint, glowing energy began to emanate from the creature's palm. The pain in his shoulder slowly subsided, and he felt a sense of warmth and healing wash over him. When the Sasquatch finally pulled its hand away, Jack stared at the creature, his eyes wide with wonder.
How did you do that?" The Sasquatch let out a low, rumbling sound, almost as if it were trying to communicate with him.
Jack leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration as he tried to understand the creature's meaning. Suddenly, a flash of movement outside the window caught his eye, and he instinctively turned his gaze towards it. There, in the distance, he glimpsed a figure darting through the trees, a figure that could only be Tom. Jack's heart raced as he realized that his former partner was still out there, still a threat. He had to warn Abigail, had to do something to stop him. But as he opened his mouth to call out, the Sasquatch let out a deep, resonant growl, its eyes fixed on the window. Jack froze, his breath catching in his throat as he watched the creature's muscles tense, ready to spring into action. In that moment, Jack knew that the Sasquatch was no mere animal, no simple beast to be captured and studied. It was an intelligent, sentient being with its own goals and agenda, and somehow it had become inextricably linked to Jack's own fate. As the Sasquatch turned its gaze back to him, Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. He knew that he was caught up in something much larger than he had ever imagined, something that had the power to change the course of his life forever. And with the Sasquatch's protective presence by his side, he couldn't help but wonder what other secrets and surprises this enigmatic creature had in store. Just then, the sound of a door slamming echoed through the cabin, and Jack's heart leapt into his throat. Abigail's voice rang out, filled with urgency. "Jack, the Sasquatch, it's gone!" Jack's eyes widened as he realized that the massive creature had disappeared, leaving him alone in the cabin. He could only imagine what had drawn the Sasquatch away, and the thought filled him with a sense of dread. Ignoring the pain in his shoulder, Jack pushed himself off the bed and hurried towards the door. He had to find Abigail, had to figure out what was happening. As he stepped into the main room, he found Abigail standing near the window, her face etched with concern. "What's going on?" Jack asked, his voice tense. Abigail turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "It's Tom," she said, her words laced with urgency. "He's been tracking the Sasquatch, and now he's closing in on its location. We have to stop him before he gets to it." Jack felt his heart pound in his chest. "Then what are we waiting for?" he said, his voice resolute. "Let's go." Abigail nodded, her expression grim. "I was hoping you'd say that. Come on, we don't have much time." Without another word, the two of them hurried out of the cabin, racing through the dense forest in pursuit of the Sasquatch and its elusive adversary. Jack's mind raced with 1,000 questions, but all he could think about was the need to protect the creature that had saved his life. As they pushed deeper into the wilderness, Jack couldn't help but wonder what other surprises and revelations were in store. One thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. Jack's lungs burned as he and Abigail pushed through the dense foliage, racing to catch up to the Sasquatch. His heart pounded, fueled by a mixture of fear and determination. He had to find the creature, had to make sure it was safe from Tom's deadly onslaught. As they ran, Abigail suddenly grabbed his arm, bringing him to a halt. "Wait," she said, her voice hushed. "Do you hear that?" Jack strained his ears, and in the distance, he could make out the faint sound of a struggle, the roar of the Sasquatch, the crackle of energy, and the shouts of his former partner. "They're close," Abigail whispered. "We have to be careful." Jack nodded, his grip tightening on the makeshift weapon Abigail had given him, a sturdy branch sharpened to a point. He knew he was no match for Tom's advanced technology, but he had to try, for the sake of the Sasquatch. Creeping forward, they finally reached a small clearing, and the scene that unfolded before them made Jack's blood run cold. The Sasquatch was locked in a fierce battle with Tom, its massive form crashing through the underbrush as it grappled with its adversary. But Tom was relentless, his strange weapon blazing with energy as he unleashed blast after blast, driving the creature back. Jack watched in horror as the Sasquatch stumbled, its movements growing sluggish. Tom seized the opportunity, advancing with a cruel grin on his face. "End of the line, you oversized freak," Tom spat, raising his weapon. Without thinking, Jack surged forward, his makeshift spear raised high. "No!" he cried, throwing himself between the Sasquatch and Tom's attack. The energy blast struck him squarely in the chest, and Jack felt a searing pain rip through his body. He crumpled to the ground, his vision blurring as the world around him faded. "Jack!" Abigail's voice rang out, filled with anguish. Through the haze of pain, Jack saw the Sasquatch turn towards him, its eyes wide with what seemed like fear. The creature let out a deafening roar, its focus shifting from Tom to Jack. Tom laughed, a cruel, triumphant sound.
Looks like your little pet has finally met its match, he sneered. The Sasquatch charged towards Tom, its massive fists raised, but the human was ready. Another blast of energy struck the creature, sending it reeling back with a pained howl. Jack watched in horror as the Sasquatch collapsed, its powerful frame shuddering with the force of the attack. He tried to call out, to warn the creature, but his voice was little more than a strangled gasp. Tom approached the fallen Sasquatch, a twisted smile on his face. Well, well, looks like the mighty beast isn't so invincible after all. He raised his weapon, and Jack knew that this time the Sasquatch wouldn't be spared. Abigail rushed forward, her own makeshift weapon raised high.
No, Tom, stop! But Tom simply knocked her aside with a casual flick of his wrist, his focus never leaving the Sasquatch. Jack's heart pounded in his ears as he watched the scene unfold, powerless to do anything to stop it. He had to find a way to save the creature, to protect it from the fate that Tom had in store. Suddenly, a movement in the corner of his eye caught his attention, and he turned to see a small, furry figure emerge from the bushes. It was a Sasquatch cub, its large eyes filled with fear as it watched the confrontation. Jack's breath caught in his throat. Of course, the Sasquatch had a family, a community that depended on it, and now that community was in danger. Summoning the last of his strength, Jack pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the searing pain in his chest. "Tom," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "Leave them alone." Tom turned, his eyes narrowing. "Oh, so the traitor wants to play the hero, huh?" He leveled his weapon at Jack, his finger poised on the trigger. Jack stood his ground, his gaze unwavering. "If you kill me, you'll have the entire Sasquatch tribe to deal with." He gestured towards the cub, now visible in the clearing. "And I doubt you can take them all on." Tom's expression darkened, and for a moment, Jack thought he might pull the trigger anyway. But then, a strange, calculating look crossed the man's face. "You know, you might have a point," Tom said, his voice dripping with false amiability. "Maybe we can come to some sort of arrangement." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of arrangement?" Tom grinned, his eyes glinting with malice. "Well, you see, I've been tasked with capturing the Sasquatch, alive and unharmed, and I'd hate to have to go through the trouble of hunting down the entire tribe just to get what I want." He gestured towards the fallen Sasquatch. "So here's the deal. You help me subdue this one, and I'll spare the rest of its kind. What do you say?" Jack's mind raced, his heart pounding. He couldn't betray the Sasquatch, not after it had saved his life. But the thought of putting the entire tribe at risk was too much to bear. "Tom, please," Abigail spoke up, her voice trembling with emotion. "Don't do this. There's no need for more bloodshed." Tom's expression hardened. "I'm afraid I don't have much choice, Abigail. The powers that be want that Sasquatch, and they want it now." He turned his gaze back to Jack, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "So what's it gonna be, Jack? Are you gonna help me, or are you gonna watch your little furry friends get slaughtered?" Jack felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him, his mind racing to find a way out of this impossible situation. He couldn't betray the Sasquatch, but he also couldn't bear the thought of the entire tribe being wiped out because of his stubbornness. As he stared at the wounded creature, its eyes filled with a silent plea, Jack knew what he had to do.
Steeling himself, he stepped forward, his hands raised in surrender. "All right, Tom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'll help you." Tom's grin widened, and he let out a triumphant laugh. "Excellent choice, Jack. I knew you'd come around." He turned to the Sasquatch, his weapon still trained on the creature. "All right, you oversized ape, time to play nice. Your little friend here has agreed to help me, so you better behave." The Sasquatch let out a low, rumbling growl, its eyes fixed on Jack with a mixture of betrayal and something else. Disappointment? Resignation? Jack felt his heart break as he watched the creature's defiant spirit slowly give way to defeat. He had made his choice, and now he had to live with the consequences.
As Tom approached the Sasquatch, his weapon at the ready, Jack couldn't help but wonder if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Was he truly betraying the Sasquatch, or was there something more to this arrangement? One thing was certain, the stakes had never been higher. The fate of the entire Sasquatch tribe now rested on his shoulders, and Jack knew that he couldn't afford to fail. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Whatever happened next, he would have to be ready. The Sasquatch was counting on him, and he couldn't let it down, not after all it had done to protect him. With a heavy heart, Jack stepped forward, ready to do whatever it took to ensure the safety of the Sasquatch and its kin. But as he did so, a sudden realization dawned on him. This was far from over. The true battle had only just begun. Jack took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't believe he was doing this, but he knew he had no choice. The fate of the entire Sasquatch tribe rested on his shoulders, and he couldn't let them down. As Tom approached the wounded Sasquatch, Jack steeled himself, trying to ignore the way the creature's eyes seemed to plead with him. He had to go through with this, no matter how much it tore him apart inside. "All right, Tom," Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want me to do?" Tom grinned, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "It's simple, really. I need you to help me subdue the Sasquatch so we can transport it without any complications." Jack glanced over at the Sasquatch, his heart sinking. The creature was clearly wounded, its massive frame shuddering with the effort to stay upright. He knew that it was in no condition to put up much of a fight. "And what about the rest of the tribe?" Jack asked, his voice strained. "You said you'd spare them if I helped you." Tom chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh, don't worry, Jack. As long as you do your part, the rest of those furry freaks will be left alone. This is just between you and me." Jack felt a wave of disgust wash over him, but he pushed it down, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand.
He had to do this, no matter how much it went against his principles. Slowly, he approached the Sasquatch, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. The creature watched him warily, its eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and betrayal. "I'm sorry, Jack," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I have to do this. Please, just trust me." The Sasquatch let out a low, rumbling growl, but it didn't move to attack. Jack reached out, his hand trembling, and gently placed it on the creature's shoulder. Suddenly, a strange sensation washed over him, a tingling warmth that seemed to spread from his fingertips and throughout his entire body. He felt a connection, a bond with the Sasquatch that was unlike anything he had ever experienced. And in that moment, Jack knew what he had to do. Turning to Tom, he fixed the man with a steely gaze. "No." Tom's eyes widened, his expression shifting from triumph to confusion. "What do you mean, no?" Jack took a step forward, his voice firm and unwavering. "I'm not going to help you, Tom. I won't betray the Sasquatch, not after everything it's done for me." Tom's face contorted with rage, and he raised his weapon, his finger poised on the trigger. "You fool! Do you have any idea what you're up against?" Jack didn't flinch, his eyes locked with Tom's. "I don't care. I won't be a part of this. Not anymore." Abigail stepped forward, her own makeshift weapon clutched tightly in her hands. "Jack's right, Tom. This has to stop. We've already lost so much, and I won't let you take anything else from us." Tom's gaze darted between the two of them, his expression a mix of fury and desperation. "You don't understand, Abigail. This is bigger than all of us. The powers that be, they want that Sasquatch, and they'll stop at nothing to get it." Jack shook his head, his resolve unwavering. "Then we'll stop them, Tom. All of us. Together." Tom let out a hollow laugh, his finger tightening on the trigger. "You really think you can win? You're nothing but a bunch of fools, fighting a losing battle." Suddenly, a low, rumbling growl echoed through the clearing, and Jack turned to see the Sasquatch slowly rising to its feet, its eyes glowing with a fierce, primal determination. The creature let out a deafening roar,
its massive frame towering over them all, and Jack felt a surge of awe and pride swell within him. The Sasquatch was no mere animal, and it was time for the world to see its true power. Tom's eyes widened, and he took a step back, his weapon wavering. What is this? Jack stepped forward, placing himself between the Sasquatch and Tom. This is the true power of the Sasquatch, Tom, a power that you and your masters will never understand. He gestured towards the creature, his voice filled with conviction. This Sasquatch, it's not just an animal. It's something more. It's a guardian, a protector of the wilderness and everything in it.
And it's not going to let you or anyone else take it down without a fight. Tom's expression twisted with fear and desperation. You don't know what you're up against, Jack. These people, they'll stop at nothing to get what they want, and if you stand in their way, they'll crush you like a bug. Jack shook his head, his gaze unwavering. I don't care, Tom. I'm not going to let them win, not after everything the Sasquatch has done for me. This ends here, and it ends now. He turned to Abigail, his eyes filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Abigail, you need to get out of here. Get as far away from this place as possible. Take the Sasquatch cub and make sure it's safe. Abigail's eyes widened, and she opened her mouth to protest, but Jack cut her off. Please, Abigail, I need you to do this, for the sake of the tribe. I'll hold off Tom and his masters, but I need you to make sure the Sasquatch has a future. Abigail hesitated for a moment, her gaze flicking between Jack and the Sasquatch. Finally, she nodded, her expression resolute. All right, Jack, I'll do it. But you better come back to us, you hear? Jack managed a small smile, his heart swelling with gratitude. I will, Abigail, I promise. As Abigail hurried away, the Sasquatch cub in tow, Jack turned his attention back to Tom, his body tense and ready for the fight to come. Tom's eyes narrowed, his weapon still raised. You really think you can win, don't you? He sneered. You're nothing but a fool, Jack, and soon you'll be nothing but a memory. Jack felt a surge of determination course through him. Maybe I am a fool, Tom, but I'd rather be a fool than a traitor or a pawn in the hands of people who care nothing for the world we live in. He took a step forward, his voice firm and unwavering. This ends today, Tom. You and your masters, you're not going to win, not as long as the Sasquatch and I are here to stop you. Tom's expression twisted with rage, and he let out a guttural roar, his finger tightening on the trigger. But before he could fire, the Sasquatch surged forward, its massive frame moving with a speed and agility that defied its size. The creature swatted the weapon from Tom's hand, sending it clattering to the ground, and then it grabbed the man, its powerful hands closing around his throat. Tom struggled, his face turning purple as the Sasquatch's grip tightened. Jack watched, his heart pounding, as the two adversaries fought for their lives. But then, just as it seemed that Tom would be crushed, the Sasquatch suddenly released him, letting the man crumple to the ground, gasping for air. Jack stared at the creature, his eyes wide with confusion. Why didn't you kill him? The Sasquatch turned its gaze to Jack, its eyes filled with a strain, almost human-like understanding. It let out a low, rumbling sound, and Jack felt a surge of awe and wonder wash over him. You don't want to kill him, Jack breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. You want him to live, to see what he's done. The Sasquatch nodded, its massive head dipping in affirmation. Jack turned to Tom, who was still struggling to catch his breath. You hear that, Tom? The Sasquatch is sparing your life, even after everything you've done, because it knows that the real punishment is having to live with the consequences of your actions. Tom glared at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hatred. You'll both pay for this. You have no idea what you're up against. Jack shook his head, his expression hardening. No, Tom, it's you who has no idea what you're up against, because the Sasquatch and I were going to put an end to your master's plans once and for all. He stepped closer to the Sasquatch, his hand reaching out to gently touch the creature's massive arm. And we're going to do it together, as partners, because that's what we are, you and me. We're in this fight, side by side. The Sasquatch let out a low, rumbling sound, its eyes fixed on Jack with a newfound respect and understanding. And in that moment, Jack knew that he had found his true calling, his true purpose in life. He turned to Tom, his gaze unwavering.
This is your last warning, Tom. Walk away and never come back. Because if you try to come after the Sasquatch or its tribe again, I won't hesitate to stop you, no matter what it takes." Tom's expression twisted with rage, but he knew he was outmatched. With a final, hateful glare, he turned and stumbled away, disappearing into the forest. Jack let out a deep breath, his body sagging with relief. It was over, for now, but he knew that the fight was far from done. He turned to the Sasquatch, his eyes filled with a newfound sense of purpose. "All right, my friend, it's time we put an end to this once and for all. Are you with me?" The Sasquatch let out a deep, rumbling growl, its eyes burning with a fierce determination. And in that moment, Jack knew that they were truly partners, bound by a connection that went beyond mere words or understanding. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, and they would emerge victorious. Because they were more than just a human and a creature, they were a force to be reckoned with, a symbol of the power of nature and the indomitable spirit of those who fight to protect it. As they set off into the forest, their footsteps pounding in sync, Jack felt a sense of purpose and clarity that he had never known before. The Sasquatch was his ally, his friend, and together they would change the course of history. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The reign of those who sought to exploit and destroy the natural world was coming to an end, and Jack and the Sasquatch would be there to witness its downfall and to usher in a new era of harmony and balance. It was a daunting task, but Jack was ready. With the Sasquatch by his side, he knew that he could face anything and emerge victorious.
And as they disappeared into the depths of the forest, he couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and anticipation for the battles that lay ahead. For the first time in his life, Jack felt truly alive, truly connected to the world around him. And he knew that no matter what happened, he would never be alone again.